Yeah, let me just start the recording. All right. Thank you guys for joining us. Both Mikhil and Neeru have joined us today, both great entrepreneurs of the industry, and all you participants, thank you for joining us for an exciting discussion from the CMU Alumni Mumbai group. We have both great pioneers today, Mikhil Innani, who is the the MD and the CEO of Apollo Finvest. It's an NBFC certified technology platform that enables any company to offer digital loans in under 48 hours. And Neeru Sharma, the co-founder and director of Infibeam Avenues, also a great digital payments and e-commerce platform that enables its partners to build and manage online commerce. Before we join and start the discussion, I'd like our CMU chapter president, Rekha Koita, to give a few opening comments.
Thank you, Yash, and welcome everyone to this wonderful evening. I'm really looking forward to this discussion and the Q&A session with both Neeru and Mikhil. And I think the additional thing which we must mention here is that both of them are our own our Tartans. They're both CMU alums. Neeru has graduated from Tepper in 2008, and I think Neeru, even your husband is a Tepper MBA, so you're like a Tepper couple. That's great. And has done is from MISN in 2011. So both of them are our own stellar alums, and we're really happy to have both of you here. It's always great to have our own alums as the speakers on these webinars. So a very warm welcome to both of you. Thank you for taking out this time, and welcome to all the participants who have taken time out on Friday to join us for this event. And with that, why don't you take it forward, Yash?
Thanks so much, Rekha. Yeah, we have a great group of attendees today, spanning from all industries. We have people from fintech and e-commerce, and then we have people from education, architecture, and also enthusiasts from industry experts all the way to students. So thank you guys for joining us. Today's discussion has quite a great historical precedence. Since the early 2000s, when we had the dot-com crash, nobody imagined India to really be the place to see such a great digital boom. Except for two of our great people who've joined us today, Neeru and Mikhil, who saw this trend at an early stage. They both graduated from CMU, worked at super companies such as Hotstar and Amazon, and then came to India to jumpstart their companies and have built platforms that have enabled some of the biggest companies online. So I would love to talk a little bit more about Neeru and Mikhil. So Neeru's Infibeam Avenues, they started off as an online books platform, and now have grown to the largest digital payments platform and also one of the largest e-commerce platforms in India. They have over 10 lakh merchants and 90,000 live stores, and they offer logistics, marketing, payment services, you name it, to anybody who wants to be in the commerce space. Whereas Mikhil has started his entrepreneurial journey much earlier at Coupon Dunya, and then co-founded PharmEasy, a famous company in the pharmaceuticals market, and then now is working at Apollo Finvest and leading it with over 35 fintech partners, and has scaled his company to over 1,000 rupee crore disbursements. Not to mention, of course, its company growth has been reflected in its stock price. 3 years ago, it was at rupees 10 per share, and now has gone over 400 rupees per share, a 40-time increase. So guys, thank you so much for joining us. And I would like you to guys just give a few opening comments, to tell us about yourselves, your companies, your background. Please.
Sure. So should I start?
Absolutely. Ladies first.
Okay, so I'm Neeru Sharma. I am co-founder and director at Infibeam Avenues. And we started back in 2008. Before that, I had worked 6 years in the technology sector. I had worked with TCS, Alcatel. Thereafter, I went for my MBA at Tepper. And since then, I think I moved from the technology side of things to the business side of things. I started with Amazon post Tepper. I worked for a few years in M&A finance at Amazon. That is where a couple of like-minded people joined hands, and we thought that we would go back and do something similar for the digital landscape in India. In India, I think it was a very, very early stage for e-commerce back then. It was, I think, only a few good names like Rediff was there, India Time Shopping was there, and Flipkart had just made an entry. So as part of the M&A finance team, I was also lucky to actually scope out India for Amazon expansion, etc. And we figured out that there was a lot of play, there was a lot of scope in Indian e-commerce. And that is how we connected. We thought that let us do something for India. We moved back. We started off as a pure play retail bookstore, and books was perhaps the easiest things because it was pretty standardized in nature. It was more like a product commodity, and everybody understood there was no look and feel element other than the ISBN of the book. So it was an easy start. Then there was the natural progression for us towards electronics, towards lifestyle. So we forayed into the retail sector for quite some time. And thereafter, we started getting a lot of demand from retailers and brands who wanted to know that what sort of technology infrastructure they should use when they are planning their entry into e-commerce. That is how we started with Build a Bazaar. It's been almost 6 to 7 years of Build a Bazaar now. And Build a Bazaar is basically a platform solution that we are giving out to businesses and now even the government. Anybody who wants to set up their presence in e-commerce, starting from a customer acquisition marketing kind of services, then the formal e-commerce. It could be your own store, it could be an omni-channel platform, it could be a marketplace. We offer all kind of variants. And thereafter, with an acquisition of Odigma, which was a digital marketing company, we expanded our suite to digital marketing services. Then we merged with CC Avenues 3 years back. And since then we became Infibeam Avenues. So now the suite is pretty much, we have platforms, we have infrastructure, and we have payments. In the platform space, we are a cloud-based e-commerce technology platform. We allow enterprise clients to transact online, process orders and payments. It is a lot of marketing and more. In the payment space, we are actually integrated with 250 plus payment methods. It is multilingual, multi-currency. We have operations in India and the Middle East. Now, the recent addition has been the infrastructure, where in partnership with Schneider and IBM, we are designing tier 3 data centers for both the public and private sector enterprises. So that enables a very asset-light business model, a very highly scalable infrastructure, and a very transaction-based revenue model for us. So this is where we are. And I think as the conversation goes, I'll dig deeper into a few of the platforms which are very interesting and the recent ones. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Neeru. That's great, a great introduction. I think there are a lot of things that we'll hopefully try and touch upon everything if we can. Mikhil, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, phenomenal stuff, Neeru. I mean, just love to hear about your journey. I'll give you a little bit of my background, right? So I actually graduated from CMU in about 2011. So I completed my master's there, and really pretty much after that, I guess the last decade I've primarily spent in, the digital ecosystem in India, more or less in, I guess, in the startup world here, right? So I started off my career by being one of the very, very early team members at Coupon Dunya. So I was actually the 4th employee back then, and I was heading product, and that was like a phenomenal journey. I think in a couple of years, from being an obscure kind of, couponing website, which when you're very, honestly, when we started, right, it looked like a college project gone bad in terms of the website. We got acquired by Times Internet, and that was a phenomenal journey. Like I learned so much, in that company. We all read in these books where, they teach you about having great culture in your companies, etc. Right? But very honestly, hand to heart, like that's the company where I would say that I really understood, the meaning of having phenomenal teams and great culture. And it was all driven by Sameer, who was the, the founder and CEO there. After that, I started up my own company by the name of, PharmEasy, and, interesting CMU connection there. PharmEasy actually came about from a very interesting conversation I had with, one of my roommates at CMU, right, back in the day. Hardik, and he was running this really, really large, pharma distribution company. And we always spoke about how he had, fantastic supply chain, right? And I was always after his life to do something in the consumer space with all of that amazing infra that they've built. And, once, of course, Coupon Dunya basically was done and dusted, that's when he was just like, hey, why don't, you do what you've been kind of annoying me with, right? And And that's how basically PharmEasy was born, right? And I really, we came in super early, and literally, like, I was employee number 4 at Coupon Dunya, and employee number 5, 6, 7, and 8, were the first employees really at PharmEasy. And the chemistry was just so phenomenal, right? I mean, it was honestly, initially when we started, it was almost like we are in the same company, but it's a different project that we're doing. Everybody knew each other's strengths and weaknesses, and it was just so intuitive what we did. And of course, PharmEasy, was a rocket ship, right? I think we just focused so deeply on essentially the chronic user base, right, in terms of people who have diabetes, high blood pressure, things like that, right? And that really became our singular focus on how can we enable like a seamless healthcare management for this user base in India, right? And I think PharmEasy yet of course continues to do like a stellar job in that space, right? Once we raised we raised a Series B round, we raised hundreds of millions of dollars. I had that itch in me, like where I wanted to, do something at really, really large scale. And that's when I started my conversations with Hotstar, right? And this is back in 2016. And I think, Hotstar back then, it's funny, but it was actually quite enticing to me because at back then they had 7 million monthly active users. And that, back then seemed quite impressive, right? And I was like, wow, I mean, I definitely want a shot at that. And, not a lot of people know this, but initially the entire technology team at Hotstar was completely outsourced to Accenture, right? So really the mandate to me was like, hey, like, you build companies like Coupon.Dunya, like PharmEasy, can you bring up that same chemistry, that magic, and that same kind of, quality of team to really take Hotstar to the next level, right? Because you can't build like $1 billion tech company without, having a world-class tech team. And that really became the mandate, right? So in Hotstar, really, it was all about, it was a very different kind of vibe because, the goal there was I couldn't literally do everything myself at that scale. So we really had to build and, hire like world-class leaders. So I would say like that was the number one thing really that I did over there. Get an A+ team in place, right from, your engineering heads to your HR heads to your data science heads, your machine learning heads. And honestly, I just got the chance to build my dream team, right? Got to work with people who I think are the, one of the best, in the industry really has to offer. And from an experience standpoint, right, I think just from a technology challenges perspective, it was bar none, right? I think in the couple of years before our acquisition with Disney, I think Hotstar grew to about close to about 200 to 50 million monthly actives. And, the kind of technology challenges that we were handling back then, I mean, it just gives me goosebumps, thinking about that experience, right? It was, I mean, if, and I yet say this, by the way, like if you're like a, technologist at heart and you want to go in and do something which is, at monster scale in India, like I think you'll struggle to find, more challenging companies than Hotstar, to take on the kind of scale that they are doing, right? Basically, I mean, literally during my time there, we broke like world records when it came to the live concurrent users on a video stream, right? We used to have like, people from like all over the place, right? Akamai, Google, all of these guys literally seeing how we're doing dynamic ads at that kind of scale. So yeah, fantastic experience. Uh, Disney came in, of course, they bought out Star, of course, one of the crown jewels for them being Hotstar. And, being honest, my entrepreneurial itch was also acting up, right? I wanted to build something of my own. I guess, that's where Apollo came into the picture. And, Apollo is really like, it's a very interesting kind of company, right? I mean, in one line, of course, like Yash said in the start, we're actually a listed entity. And in one line, the way to describe us is we're basically AWS for digital lending, right? So today we work with almost like, 25, 30 odd companies in India to enable them to offer digital loans, to their users, right? So we work with companies like, your Flipkart, your Tala, Avail Finance, MoneyTap, Money on Click, Razorpay, InstaMojo, Open. All of these companies, right, basically today are building on top of the Apollo infra. And broadly, like we basically offer, I would say, 3 broad products, right? One is the whole, you could call it NBFC as a service, right? Where you get plug and play digital NBFC right out of the box. And the best thing that people like about us is the fact that you can go live with us in under 48 hours. So it's literally all you need is basically like, one engineer who can wire you up with REST APIs and you're good to go. The second piece is, literally solving the problem of if you don't have engineers, right? If you don't have engineers, you have a plug and play platform. So that's called technology as a service, where, you could just be a business guy who has an idea in digital lending, and you can go live on our platform, and, you have an entire suite of technology services ready to go, right from your loan management systems to your disbursement, collection APIs, eKYC APIs, you pretty much name it. And finally, the thing which all fintechs, of course, need, especially in lending, it's capital, right? So we also offer capital as a service, which helps, scale digital lending companies by basically not diluting their cap table, right? So we try to cover the entire basically, journey, and our mission here is very simple. We want to enable any company in India, right, to start offering digital loans by lowering the barriers to entry. And we've started that by basically enabling and getting together all the Lego blocks needed to get kick started with your own digital lending operations and get going in under 48 hours.
Yeah, superb, Mikhil. I think you've, again, just like Neeru, have touched upon so many amazing aspects that that we'll discuss about, right? So you're talking about the three different things that you provide. You have your NBFC license, you have your technology, and then you actually have the capital to support your business. And I think we'll get into it a little bit more. For anybody, there's a little any of the attendees, there's a little Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions for Neeru or Mikhil along the way, please drop them in there. Towards the latter half of the session, we'll have you vocally ask your questions to either or both of the participants. So please do that. So just going back a little bit before we jump into the real depth of it, I really want to know what were those foundational aspects that you guys considered when you all moved into this space, right? So for Neeru, what was it that made you think that, okay, you were starting your own online retail bookstore? And what was it? Was it a certain conversation or a bunch of conversations that you had that allowed you to explore and move into the entire enabling space where you help other platforms build? And the same question for Mikhil, right? Like when you started off, Apollo Finvest originally was already an NBFC licensed provider, and then you had your certain services, and then you decide to move out. So what was that unique thought process that you had, or your building concept that you decided to grow your companies? Please, Neeru.
Yeah. So I think when we started, so as I said before, that we had pretty much, we looked at the Indian market. We knew that there was space. We knew that e-commerce was at a different point in India at that time. So there was, I think, back in 2007, there wasn't even awareness about e-commerce. And one is the awareness, then is the education, then is the marketing. So there was a whole bit of stuff to be done. You have to educate the customer to do their first transaction online. You had to enable the supply chain to make sure that once a first order is taken, then it is delivered at the right time, because that builds on the customer trust. So we've seen the days, we've seen the customer journey from a customer delight that, wow, this project reached home. Then the second phase was a customer satisfaction. He knows and he trusts you. He trusts the brand that, yeah, if I order from there, I'll get the product in time. Then the third one is, now it's become like more of a customer obsession and customer retention, because there's so many companies and brands fighting for the same customer, for the same space. So kind of dilutes the customer loyalty, because customer might be loyal to a brand. He wants the same Apple product or the same book, but then there is offers and pricing everywhere, because pretty much the supply chain part of it is being handled by the similar middleware. So for us, the journey was pretty much one to start with, okay, this is the right time to go to India. Start with books, natural progression into electronics, because when you start with products, it is very easy for the customer to come, search, and then decide that, yeah, probably this is the price I want to buy it at. But then thereafter, when we solved it, and we are solving it for it was a platform, multi-brand play for us, because we were more like a marketplace. There were sellers who were selling the products themselves, and then there was Infibeam, who was also retailing to the end customer. Now there is a lot of brands who also want to connect to their own customer, because when they supply their products to us and we are selling it, their kind of customer connect goes missing. They are selling it to us. The product is selling. They know that the market size is increasing, but they want to connect to the customers themselves. And these were like one of the first clients for us was like Crossword. So imagine Crossword, who was actually a competitor for us in the retail space, ended out being a client to us in the platform space, because they were themselves figuring out how to sell. Now, what did we offer to Crossword that brought them in? Because one was that they could sell much beyond their limited physical inventory, limited physical bookstore space. And for that, Infibeam was actually also offering them the catalog, the supply chain, the delivery services, and all of that as one package. So for us to get into the platform space, we had to pretty much crack the formula that it's not just about technology. It has to be a comprehensive end-to-end solution. Now, as we grew through this journey, we started with giving technology, then we started digital marketing, then we added a lot of logistics space. There is a middle layer that we created for supply chain. Payment gateway started getting offered. So the whole formula becomes a very, very strong and robust engine for anybody who has a thought to go through. And when we talk about only a physical play store moving into an online, they typically start with selling their own inventory and gradually expand. But now came the era of omni-channel. Now, when you say omni-channel, you have a physical space, you have a online space, and online and physical are kind of merged into each other, because you're saying I'm placing an order online, but I'm actually going to pick it from the nearest store. So the orders are talking to the inventories are in different stores, in different warehouses. So now there is a very strong back-end warehouse and order inventory system as well that comes into play. So as we kept unfolding each of these layers, I think the whole solution became more strong. It became more comprehensive, and it was very easy for us to give it all in all to a client. And for a client also, instead of going to 100 different players, they found a lot of value in actually signing up with us. So this is where I think the journey started for us, and then finally expanded to where we are today, where we are also offering it to the government. And when we talk about government, it's a very, very different need that they have, because the government buyer is not like a regular customer. He's actually bound within certain financial rules set by the government. Each buyer has a different kind of requirement. They're meant to buy within certain limits. There are so many different modes of procurement. So just because of the rigidity of the platform and a lot of expertise in this space, we were able to actually carve out a solution that is today working even for the government. So GEM, which is a government e-marketplace, it is actually in the last 3 years, they would have crossed nearly 55,000 crores of transactions. And this is all small sellers selling to the government directly, which never existed before. So we are one of the consortium partners in this project, and it's very exciting.
Wonderful. Yeah, you really touched upon the few next questions that I have. They're going to be about how do you guys traverse those Indian regulations, the market space, and really build according to what the Indian ecosystem required. You know, when you situate yourselves here and build accordingly, you're looking at a growth value that's far superior than someone who just, you know, jump into the market from somewhere else.
Absolutely.
So yeah, great. Mikhil, please go ahead. What were your initial thoughts in your process, your thinking process to offer the value that now Apollo Finvest offers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, for me, basically, I think it was a lot of kind of things, right? So I mean, essentially, when I was building PharmEasy, right, and this was like one of my first experiences with, you know, with experiencing the lack of credit, right? So we used to work with a lot of offline pharmacies at that point in time, you know, mom and pop stores. And, you know, just to give you some background, right? So prior to working with PharmEasy, these guys used to basically be making like 20,000-30,000 rupees profit a month. But, you know, obviously once PharmEasy came in and brought in like significant amount of orders to these guys, they started making like, you know, almost 2 to 3 lakh rupees a month in terms of profit, which is phenomenal, right? Of course, for them, it's like a 10x increase. And that's when the problem essentially really started, because, you know, from going from, say, you know, that 2 lakh rupee numbers, they have to hit like 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs, they obviously needed working capital to carry that kind of inventory to fulfill these orders, right? And And, we thought back then, yeah, this should be fairly easy. We'll go knocking at a bank's door and they should be more than happy to give this, 20-year-old company with, very, very good profitable track record, some amount of working capital. And the answer was, couldn't be further from the truth, right? The reality was, honestly, in one line, traditional lenders refused to kind of acknowledge online kind of money that they were earning as a realistically stable form of business, right? And initially, what, I felt that's a fair, kind of judgment because we were, young. But it kind of got, a little bit old to hear that excuse after, PharmEasy was basically like almost a couple of years old and having raised like, hundreds of millions of dollars literally of capital. Like it was like very clear this is not a flash in the pan. It's a legit solid business. And that was quite frustrating, right? And was limiting the growth of, all of our ecosystem participants at that point in time. And then, I got to experience this at a whole different planet when I was at Hotstar, right? So obviously, back in the day, most of, 90-95% of the revenue at Hotstar used to come from ads, right? And I used to obviously do a lot of demographic analysis at that point in time. And, a very startling stat came to my mind, which was basically that almost 90-95% of India doesn't have access to formal credit. And that was actually to me extremely shocking, right? And I was like, I really wanted to know basically how do you fundamentally solve this problem, right? And I was in no illusion that, this problem is like a simple problem to solve. So the first thing I really started doing was, before I started Apollo, I almost spent like close to 4 to 5 months meeting any possible like digital lending, fintech founder, which basically took my phone call or, accepted my many spamming messages on LinkedIn, right? Literally like, hey, I want to talk to you. I want to know what's happening in this industry because from outside, this looks insane, right? This can't be real. And the feedback I constantly got, from all of these meetings was that, yeah, the market is obviously insanely large. It's like, it's like a desert out there and people are waiting for water. But the biggest problem statement right now is that, all of the, traditional lenders out there, they're not ready to kind of do anything which is technology savvy, not ready to, do any kind of experimentation with credit. They're all very, very comfortable, offering financial services and loans to that same 50 million or 100 million set of customers, which are all covered in the bureau. Anything outside that, and best of luck getting access to credit. And that got me thinking that, what's the fundamental approach to kind of solve this problem? Because, to me, it was very obvious that, I'm a very optimistic guy in general. I feel like over the next, 10, 20 years, this problem is going to, be significantly smaller. And to me, when I see an industry, right, which clearly has miles to go, I think the first thing which, you need to do really, to be able to really set, crazy amount of growth, right, in any industry is build like the operating system or build like the foundational layer inside that, inside that industry, which accelerates the growth for every participant in many ways, right? It's almost like the HTTPS layer in the internet, or, you think about the AWS, and the way you can just form an app or a website, like literally in a couple of hours. So that's what really what, inspired Apollo in many ways, right? And where we wanted to basically build, the operating system, for offering all of these services, right? Where you could start offering digital loans in a matter of 48 hours. And we started with a very, very fundamental problem, right? Like when people wanted to start, how do you start, right? You need to work with a registered NBFC in order to do proper lending in India. So that was the very first product, right? NBFC as a service, right? Where literally like make the entire integration process with an NBFC, which is literally ours, happen in 48 hours, right? And to me, that was very, very important. Of course, the next aspect came that after working with so many fintechs, we kind of realized that, hey, like, the technology layer is completely fragmented, right? There are like literally thousands of these service providers who are providing, all kinds of different APIs for different things. And it was actually, to me, it was just annoying that imagine like being a fintech founder and trying to build this, concoction together. You'll be bombarded by so many service providers, and who do you trust? Which API works? Well, you have no idea, right? And we just decided that, what, we're just going to build this stuff in the form of a curated marketplace where, because we work with so many fintechs, we know firsthand what works and what doesn't. And whatever is crappy, we just build ourselves. And whatever is, tier A, amazing, world-class stuff, we just, combine that into our platform, so that from a fintech perspective, all they have to do is come to us, integrate with us, and again, keep the theme alive, that basically be able to go live in 48 hours. And obviously, finally, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that all of these digital lenders want capital, right? And actually, debt capital in India, which is,
I think
yeah.
we have more questions. Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry, Mikhil. Go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
Finish your thought, and we have more questions also.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, I mean, just to complete, right? Essentially, we had obviously a big request of capital also coming in, right? Where the debt capital in India is just so shallow, right? Especially for fintechs, and that's where really we started offering, debt capital as well, to help these fintechs really scale up to another level as well, right? And fundamentally, our belief is super simple. We think, every company, right? And I mean this like literally, like I feel like, things like Apple, Google, Amazon, Uber, all of these guys, by the way, and every company you can think of in India, right from your Zomatos and Swiggies of the world, over the next, 5 to 10 years, every company is going to have a financial services division within them, and start offering these financial services to their ecosystem, players. And what's really needed is that operating system, right across financial services, not only digital lending, but to reduce the friction to start all of these things, and basically take this thing to a whole different level, so that we're able to reach that financial inclusion goal that obviously India should be getting to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both of you guys have really understood the idea of helping others to plug in and play, right? And then I think that concept of providing a whole service from the beginning all the way to the end to help these companies like reach those goals, and then of course help India as a nation to go more digital and become more current, I would say. I think that's the real big goal and the real big game. Now reflecting a little bit more on like your companies and and the ecosystem that you guys are providing to, what do you think were your the things that you found easy or difficult in terms of like your regulations, in terms of team or work culture, that really you think were some hitting points that you would either have wanted to change or you had to change? Please, Neeru.
Okay, so I think this question sounds to me like more of an entrepreneur and less of the platform. So I think being an entrepreneur, one of the very, very important things which Mikhil also touched upon earlier was to actually build the right team. And when we say build the right team, I mean, these cannot be just employees. Even if they're drawing a salary, but they have to be completely vested and passionate about what they're building. They have to speak the same language, and also I would say that they have to have difference of opinions. It's very, very important to have complementary mindsets, because only then the richest ideas come out, very bright discussions happen. And we've seen like banging our heads all the time in the initial few days.
Neeru, hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe
she's
I think
frozen.
yeah, the internet may have must be an internet connection issue. Neeru, if you can hear me, if you could try and rejoin. All right, that's fine. Well, Mikhil, why don't you go ahead and start off, and then we'll get back to
Sure.
Neeru. Yeah.
No problem. I think, so I think, of course, the point that Neeru was mentioning, no doubt about it, right? I think teams are super important. I think for me, as an example, like, I always say this, right? Like basically, like when you're hiring in a startup, right? I think it's very, very important to make sure that you hire A+ players, especially in your early team, because, I have a very simple saying, right? A+ players basically hire, other A+ players. And if you hire B players, they'll hire C players, and C players will hire D players. And soon you'll be surrounded by, like people you just don't want to work with, basically, right? So I think one of the things that I always do is that, wake up every day and, you should be wanting to work with the rest of the team, right? It's almost like I have a very simple saying, like you end up hiring people and continue working with people that you would take to your next startup. And that's always the benchmark, I think, that you should keep in mind. I think second thing, which is very important, I think in building any business is, building a compound interest where ultimately, you end up over a period of time, the more time you're in that space, you end up building an unfair advantage. So, I mean, literally, we're in the financial services space. So I think it's very important to understand this angle of compound interest, right? So any space that you're in, I think ideally you should, be in a space where over a period of time, the more you're in it, with those experiences and with the tech and the platform that you end up building, it should become that you just end up building such a massive unfair advantage that from a competitive perspective, you're that much more, ahead of the game in many ways, right? I think, finally, you mentioned even regulations, right? Of course, it's super important, right? In financial services, no doubt about it. I think you have to always keep an eye out over there. In many ways, though my philosophy when it comes to, building businesses is that I think sometimes you have to be ahead of the curve, right? In a lot of these spaces, like, you can't go always with existing, rules and regulations which are out there, because, what you will notice is that, we are in such a dynamic space with the internet that you have to be at the forefront, and in many ways having those conversations and leading those conversations with what comes next, right? In many ways, like, I mean, no one's experienced it, I think I've experienced it a lot, I would say, with PharmEasy, of course. And when we started, literally we were getting allegations that
Mikhil, sorry
yeah.
to interrupt, we have a lot of questions, so can we be very pointed in the discussions?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, because you're running short of time, we have a long list of questions.
I think the problem is we have you guys have such great information to provide, and we have a few questions coming in already. So if you can answer in a couple, like 2 or 3 more sentences, and then Neeru can answer and we'll move forward.
Oh, perfect. Right. So, I mean, yeah, essentially, like, when it comes to regulations, right, basically, the one line is you have to be kind of ahead of the curve sometimes, and, work with the existing regulators to figure out what's next, basically, right? And that's very, very important, right? And we discovered that with PharmEasy firsthand. So that's really about it.
Nice. Thank you. Neeru, sorry, I think you cut off earlier.
Yeah.
Would you like to go ahead? Yeah.
So I think one more point I'll want to touch is that the need of the business changes as the stage of the business changes. So it's very different. You can be very entrepreneurial. You can be very agile and flexible in the earlier days, but then as you grow as a company, processes become very important. So to actually hire the right people at the right time in the stages of the company is also a very important lesson that we learned early on, and we expanded our team to get more not non-entrepreneurial but perhaps process driven people to actually set things in perspective as well.
Super. I think though that both great answers. I think what you're also trying to say is it's not just the culture, but also the correct work environment that you have to set to really build upon your business and take it forward. In that context, do you think that the Indian ecosystem was just navigating the regulations and the governmental aspect? Do you think that was something that came as a blockade, or even if it was the traditional lenders for you, Mikhil, or just the traditional players in the commerce space for you, Neeru, that really, do you think prevented you from moving forward, or do you think that was those were the best opportunities to push ahead?
Okay, so for e-commerce, I think the Indian regulations were kind of missing because e-commerce has been a very late entry in the Indian ecosystem. I wouldn't say that a lot of regulations were there in the US as well when Amazon started, right? So they formulate policies as they hear concerns, as they see things things breaking. So when we started, I think the journey has been that regulations have formed when some problems, some issues, some concerns, etc., have been raised. So regulations have been slightly, I would say business has been ahead of regulations. So business would grow and then there would be some regulation that would come in the way. I wouldn't call it a blocker per se, because regulations were kind of, solving the problem and giving the space that they were defining the space to play with. And with regulations in place, I'm sure there's a lot of clarity which helps the entire ecosystem to grow. So,
go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. From a regulation perspective, I think again, like Neeru said in one line, right? I think in our space also, like, business is typically ahead of regulation. And honestly, the fintech, especially digital lending in India is, back, I would compare it to e-commerce in 2007. It's just baby, right? It's baby. It's basically in its infancy in many ways, right? So I think we're going to see it grow so much over the next 10 years, right? And I think that's really what it is right now, right? I mean, the good thing I would say from a regulation perspective in the digital lending space is I think the government in many ways is extremely pro digital initiatives in India, right? In general, and especially in financial services, we've seen with UPI, what a game changer that was. We're seeing obviously now UPI 2, being announced, and obviously in digital lending specifically, there's things like Oken, which is basically, a protocol, right? Which more or less make sure that, fintechs, when they want to integrate with any kind of lender at the back end, there's the same language, which is spoken by both guys, right? Which is game changer in many ways when it brings everything into perspective, right? So, from our perspective, I think, fundamentally, regulations are never really like a blocker per se, in terms of business. There are, sometimes I think in an infant industry, right, you are going to see speed bumps in this, but, it's natural, right? I mean, if you're in a space which is so early stage and it's going to take like a decade to be much more mature, you have to kind of, be in this kind of patchy waters, knowing that overall, at least the government is on your side when it comes to seeing this through and pushing the industry in the right direction.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. And do you think because of that and just in general, the how do you see the Indian digital ecosystem grow? How do you, in your respective industries, how do you see it in, let's say, a 5 or 10 year horizon? How do you see other competitors entering your specific space, or just generally the financial industry, as well as the e-commerce or the digital payments, or even the data center and infrastructure industries?
So I think from a payments perspective, I'm sure Mikhil would also touch on it, but we've seen huge growth. We've seen huge growth, and the number of payment modes, the kind of, every merchant wants to have a payment gateway. These payment gateways are actually also, they have blurred lines in between, like they're all kind of becoming omni platform. So which is very interesting. And more of financing is coming into play. I think more merchants are open to these forms of financing. And I think on the payment space, I'll leave it to Mikhil to elaborate, but at least in the infrastructure space, I know that in the e-commerce platform space, we have seen a huge upsurge. We've seen single brand stores. We've seen marketplaces come in. We have seen omni-channel, the big buzzword right now. So I think all of those multi-currency, multilingual, they want to sell globally. They all want to have a global brand presence. For this, they are tying up, I mean, your inventory could be in any of the countries and you could ship it anywhere and you could still have a committed time. They're trying to outpar every time. They're trying to beat their own benchmarks and do better, because the customer obsession is there, because the market is huge, but yet there's the same customer everybody is fighting for. So I think we, as part of the e-commerce platform and infrastructure business, we see huge potential. I'm sure with more and more players coming in this space, the pricing definitely would be far more attractive than it would have been initially, because this is definitely, this is AWS, this is cloud storage and all of that. And these are kind of, I mean, the way it started, the prices are gradually reducing. So maybe the pricing will have a different play in this market. The payment gateway business is definitely growing both here, both abroad. Infrastructure as a business is being asked for in multiple countries today. I think in most of Asia Pacific, there is a huge demand for marketplaces. B2B marketplaces per se are growing. GEM is a very big example. I mean, the government marketplace just shows the kind of trust now government has in digital as a platform for its own purchase. So they are actually having all the modes of procurement enabled in a single engine. They're trying to build in advanced AI, data mining. They're trying to build in all the latest technologies and actually binding it onto one platform where the government buyers can buy. So imagine the Ministry of Finance is actually driving this entire initiative, because the procurement is actually led by the GFR, which is the financial rule set by the government for all the government buyers. So they are driving this initiative themselves. So I think with both public and private sector, we are seeing a huge upsurge in terms of the kind of businesses which are forming. The businesses which exist are growing multifold. So this industry is bound to grow, I would say, leaps and bounds in the coming 5 to 10 years.
Awesome. And Mikhil, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mean, to talk about the digital lending space, I mean, to me, like I was just saying earlier, right? I think, we are, we're very similar to e-commerce where it was in 2007, right? Like I think over the next 10 years, you're going to see, if I had to just give you an example, right? I think in many ways, uh, you know, 10 to 15 years down the line, I think children are going to be asking, all of us here, where like, why did you ever go to a bank branch, right? It's going to be like the post office in many ways, right? Like nobody goes to a post office unless they're absolutely unwilling to go and it's very, very unhappy, right? When you're going over there, because, you just can't think of a use case where you have to physically go to a post office anymore. And I think obviously with COVID and etc., right, I think that trend is just going to accelerate to another level. I think another trend which is here to stay and it's going to kind of be very, very strong is that you're going to see companies have basically financial services division of their own, and I pretty much believe this very, very strongly. I think you're going to see companies uh, right from e-commerce companies to food delivery companies to like cab companies or whatever, right? Every kind of company will end up having a financial services division of their own. Fundamentally, whether they're distributing digital loans to say digital mutual funds, insurance, right? Just as an example, like just to give an example of businesses which are be there going to be in the future, right? Just like Apollo is basically the AWS of digital lending. I'm sure there's going to be AWS for mutual funds, AWS for insurance, because that's the kind of distribution you need in India ultimately to get to financial inclusion. And we are already seeing this trend across the world, right? You're seeing Apple come out with their own credit card. You're seeing Google is in the news with they're going to come out with their own debit card. You're seeing Amazon in most places in the world, including India. They have their own credit card, and they're setting up one of the largest fintech teams in India. And there are we know that basically Uber is also setting up a very, very large fintech division within them because they want to kind of create a neobank, because the target the cab audience that they're kind of tailoring and catering to is such a unique audience, right? This buzzword is there of neo banking, right? Today actually the largest companies in the world today are already neobanks. Right now, I'll give you another example, right? So one of our customers is Razorpay, and obviously they've launched Razorpay Capital some time back. And I mean, I give that example to everybody in India, right? They are in the best position today to give out like loans to MSME customers because they are already the payment gateway. So they know the customer's transactions in and out. And in many ways, that puts them in such a huge unfair advantage in terms of just knowing the cash flow, right? They can even take foresight on receivables and make the whole transaction more or less extremely secure. Like I could give another example of, companies like Swiggy and Zomato, who I feel are probably in very, very soon, they will be in the best position to give out actually loans to restaurants because again majority of the orders may be coming through them and they have foresight on the transactions, and then ultimately the question begs to be answered where you ask yourself who's the best lender to restaurants, right? Is it Swiggy and Zomato or is it traditional lenders? So I think over a period of time you are going to be seeing a lot of the traditional players become more or less infrastructure providers, right? Where smaller and smaller ticket sizes, probably less than 5 lakh rupees or so, right? They're going to be done by, I would say, digital companies, right? Who we love and trust and who already we are doing transactions on, who know so much about us, who provide us with experiences that we love and enjoy, right? I think a lot of the infrastructure which is going to be coming in the future from a compliance regulatory standpoint is all going to be all of these traditional lenders, right? And this is, by the way, already happening in the US, right? So companies like Square, right, has already launched Square Capital. Companies like Shopify has launched Shopify Capital. All of this is already existing, and they partnered with Cross River Bank at the back end, to be basically its banking sponsor, right? And this trend, I think, is going to be very, very solid and strong over the next decade or so.
Yeah, you bring a very strong point there, Mikhil, talking about how even on if these big players, the ones who are really capitulating their specific markets currently, and how they're going to integrate across other industries, whether it be their own capital banks, whether it be their own lending services or financial services, how new entrepreneurs are going to come in and play. I would love to ask you guys that question, but I feel like I think we should jump into the Q&A first. And if we have some time after, we can come back. Anshul, if you don't mind switching on your video, and you may want to unmute yourself. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Yash. And thank you, Neerav and Mikhil, for such an insightful talk. I think it was very inspiring and encouraging for someone like me who does not belong to the industry or understand even a bit of what fintech is like. So I think it was very encouraging, and I'm overwhelmed literally to hear your journey that you have taken to get to the point that you are today. So moving on to the questions, I would unmute the participant and they can ask the question themselves directly. If you wish, you can direct it to either Mikhil or Neeru or to both. Our first question is from Neeraj Deora. Neeraj, I'm gonna unmute you. Yash, can you make me the host, please? Oh, great. Neeraj?
Hi guys. So this is just a question for either of y'all. It's just a general observation. I mean, generally in the tech space, you hear of very few companies becoming profitable and in fewer getting listed on a stock exchange. In your cases, both of y'all have profitable companies, both of y'all are listed. What are your views on this? Do you see a trend where tech-enabled companies will start turning profitable? And if so, what kind of companies and for what type of target markets? And we can restrict this to basically to the Indian market.
Sure. Should I take this, Neeru?
Sure, Mikhil, you can go first.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So, I mean, honestly, I think it depends on the type of company, to be honest. I mean, I always say that in tech, basically, there are two kinds of companies, right? One is there are these, category creating companies, and one of these companies, which I would say, in many ways, solve a need which is there at that very minute, right? And depending on the type of companies you end up building, you can end up having, either profitable companies very, very early, or sometimes it can take, much more longer. So, just giving my own personal example, right? Like when we were building something like PharmEasy, I mean, that's a category creating company. Something like this doesn't exist, right? And companies similar to that are companies like maybe like Uber when it started back in the day, right? In many ways, you're getting the customer used to something. You're changing like a very, very large industry who's just, online ordering of medicines, etc., just didn't exist as a category. So I think the kind of, expenditure you have to do from a just creating a market in many ways, right, is very, very, different in those spaces. I think at Apollo, I mean, the reason in many ways it's a listed company is because, here, like in many ways, before I got in, I knew the demand for something like this is tremendous. And by default, I think in financial services, I think it's relatively, I would say, it's understood in many ways that you can end up creating profitable companies when especially you go in knowing that there is significant amount of demand, right? So I think overall in the grand scheme of things, I think, at least my personal view is that, in many ways, the internet market in India is very shallow, right? And even, I know people talk a lot about startups and so much about tech startups, especially in India, but, the market is very, very shallow, right? We are very, very early days when you compare us to something like, a very, very mature ecosystem like this, like Silicon Valley, right? So I think over a period of time, we will have much, much more profitable companies as more and more people start using internet products and there are economies of scale kicking in so many businesses. You will automatically start having, a lot more profitable companies in many ways, with all of the negativity that COVID has brought in. I think this is going to be one silver lining of this all, that so many people will start using digital, services and products, that it will end up pushing a lot of these companies into profitability.
Thanks.
Neeru?
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Yeah, so Neeraj, I think, as Mikhil pointed out, I would also say that the businesses which are enablers of other businesses, I think they will have to think differently, because you're not a pure product company, but your product is actually an enabler product. So when you're talking about enabler products, just because of the pace, like India saw hockey stick growth in terms of in the digital space, right? Now, when you see a hockey stick growth, of course, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of parties who are interested, a lot of companies who want to build products for this market. But sustainability has now, I think demonetization was one such inflection point. Sustainability has kicked in. Businesses understand that sustainability is very important, and it's just not the growth. Of course, growth is very important. And when you see a very high growth in the market, you want to capture the maximum market share out of it. But soon you realize that this customer you are enabling, probably if not just through one formula, you can expand the service set that you are offering, so that all in all it becomes a sustainable business proposition for you. We have seen a huge change in how businesses thought about growth early on. Now it's also about margins. It's also about the variable money that is coming out of each transaction that the customer does. So this is the reality. That's all.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Thank you so much, Neeru and Mikhil. I'll jump on to our next question. Manthan, I'm gonna unmute you. Could you please ask your question?
Hey guys, hi. I'm Mikhil and Neeru. Very insightful session. Thanks a lot. So I have a quick question, which is that during your initial days, how hard or easy was it for you to attract the right set of people? So the A+ people that you spoke about. So when you guys were just starting up, how hard or easy was it? And did you guys have to provide any, sort of out of the box incentives?
Yeah, so I'll start. I mean, it is hard. It is hard, and I wouldn't call it a very easy ride for us, because the initial few people you ideate with, I think they are the ones who are most passionate about it. They've seen the idea, and they now see the idea germinating and then becoming a seed and growing into a plant. So those are the people who are completely vested in the idea. But as more and more people you interact with, the outsiders, when you start meeting them and you have to sell the product, I think it's your conviction which shows. It just, you have to talk more to them about why you created, what is the kind of problem set that you're trying to focus on, solve, and then what is the vision. I think to smart people, to intellectual people who they want to solve some problem and they want to participate in the journey. So for them, just the perks have never solved it for us. I think it has to be the journey and their vesting of in this journey with us. So I think that is what helped. Of course, we try to retain them through other non-monetary benefits as well. I mean, we have ESOPs, we have all those mechanisms in place, now being a public company as well. But having said that, I think they want to participate in the journey and they want to believe in the journey. So transparency helps at each level.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on, right? I mean, for me specifically, I think at Polo, I think one of the things which was really helpful when building that initial team, I think was, like Neeru touched upon as well. I think, initially, honestly, as an entrepreneur, right, when you're starting out, you have nothing, right? You're pretty much, that in many ways, such a small company, which the guy you're pitching to in terms of the guy, you want to desperately join your team, can join a company which is 1,000 times larger than yours, right? I mean, honestly, the only reason he's saying no to all of that is because he believes in you. So honestly, initially as an entrepreneur, the only thing you can sell is yourself, right? And that's why I feel like many ways entrepreneurs have to be great salesmen, because I mean, initially you are, so weak in terms of the kind of offers you can provide to people or to your partners or whoever, that they have to really believe in you and they have to think that, what, working with this guy makes sense, right? Ultimately. So that's, I think, number one, you're selling yourself, right? Number two is, at least what I try to do in every step of the way and every entrepreneurial journey, is really dip into your past, kind of working experiences, right? So as an example, at Hotstar, I dug, deep into trying to get the best people I've worked with at, say, PharmEasy or at Coupon Dunia to try and join me at Hotstar, right? Similarly, I mean, one of the big secrets of PharmEasy being so quick off the blocks, right, was the initial, pretty much the product tech team came from, very, very early team members at Coupon Dunia, right? I think very, honestly, hand to heart, one of the reasons why Apollo Finvest has been able to not have in many ways, team problems is because, at least I have a philosophy that I will make sure I get, A plus players from my network. And it doesn't always have to be the people you've worked with. You can actually have a really trusted set of people, that you trust in the ecosystem, or, you've got the good fortune of knowing. And if they kind of recommend other people as well, right? I take referrals and recommendations very, very seriously because, very honestly, like, that plays such an important role, right? Because if you get people with the same wavelength and that kind of mindset and culture, it just removes that bit of ambiguity, from your company as you're building it. And I think it's a secret weapon that a lot of smart founders kind of deploy, to reduce chances of failure and dramatically increase the chances of success, for their company.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, guys.
Okay, so we may have another 10 minutes as Mikhil and Neeru have accepted to stay 10 more minutes longer. The next question we have is from Shubhangam. I'm going to unmute you. Could you please ask your question?
Hi guys, yeah, I hope you can hear me. So my question is that given your unique positions in your respective industries, what kind of impact did you see due to lockdown and now that the country is opening back up again? I'm not sure if you guys get this kind of data, but just given your positions in your industries, if you have a view on like what trends or insights you saw, and now that the country is coming back up, what you're seeing as well.
Yeah, so I mean, just to go on this, right? So I think basically I would say that, I mean, from our perspective, I think more than anything, I think moratorium had a massive impact, I think, for digital lenders, no doubt about it. I think, overall, the headline really is that it was quite hard for digital lenders. I mean, I would not be surprised. I mean, to my guesstimate, I would probably say that almost 25% of the digital lenders in India pretty much had the stuffing knocked out of them, right? I think these companies just completely shut, right? And, but, even though that seems like a really, really ominous sign, right? I would probably say that, there are three ecosystem participants, right? When it comes to at least digital lending, and it's not all, doom and gloom, right? So as an example, from a traditional lender standpoint, yes, they're absolutely being, very, very risk averse right now and leaving a lot of customers on the table by just, maybe just stopping lending or lending very, very limitedly to that extremely top set of customers. But they're really adopting digital tools quite a lot, right? And which is fantastic for the second ecosystem participant, which is like these, technology providers in many ways, right? Because they've all seen a massive surge in terms of, taking, traditional lenders jumping on their infrastructure, because even though, they want to be very, very risk averse, they are very, very now hungry and, very interested in kind of adopting digital workflows, to do all of their actions digitally, because nobody's really doing anything in terms of meeting each other physically, or definitely customers don't want to, interact with anybody physically at this point in time, right? So the service providers at this point in time are seeing a massive surge because all of these traditional guys, jumping on their, systems and taking themselves in many ways digital, and all like 5-10 year digital plans have been compressed into 6 months, basically. And finally, I think for digital lenders per se, even though, near term, it was a bit of a doom and gloom. But long term, I think smart digital lenders, I think, should take this opportunity to actually capture customers which have been left behind by traditional lenders and are quality customers, right? So really build for them essentially, right? And try and kind of get them into your ecosystem as long term customers, have high lifetime values with them, and really think of what is the value prop that you can offer them, so that they're just not with you now, but they're with you long term. So if you end up, creating much higher quality portfolios today, because these customers have been, kind of not being served by traditional lenders, it could have long-term benefits. So even though, my suggestion to at least all our portfolio companies is, just be extremely resilient, and, the opportunity at the end of this tunnel will be very, very large, because the number of competitors is going to dramatically decrease, and the size of the market is just going to expand because of the reluctance of traditional lenders to serve these guys.
Neeru, do you have anything to add?
So I think from the e-commerce space, I would say that this time has been very interesting because we've seen this shift in the kind of products people are purchasing online. They've moved to essential services. Now, the good side in this is that we see a lot of, across all our platforms that we're enabling, we see a number of customers who are first time purchasers. Now, once they get used to this system of buying, I'm sure that these people, there's a lot of stickiness because there's convenience. And when there is convenience, I think at the end of the tunnel, even though the product categories that they're buying is going to expand many-fold, and the essential services which they are buying today will perhaps be into each segment of their purchase, and more wallet share will turn out in the online space. In the platform space, we have seen a huge demand in a lot of brands asking for their own stores now, because they've realized that they want to sell and connect to the customer directly, because the brand experience has to be omni-channel and multi-platform as well. So they want to have the same brand experience, be it a customer walking into a retail store or a customer coming into an online store, or he going to the social network page of this brand site. So they want to track the customer's journey everywhere he visits. So we see a lot of uptake in terms of the brands wanting to set up their stores, wanting to connect to the customer more, wanting to correct their supply chain. And perhaps there's a lot of discussions happening in forward deployment centers, which these brands want to do and sell easily to the customer, to directly deliver to the customer in a fixed time frame. So the business proposition, although the fundamentals are the same, but the mix has changed. And we see that once this phase ends, there will be a lot of new customers who are going to trust e-commerce, and tier 2 and tier 3 is also going to play a huge role now.
That's great, actually. That's very insightful again. Yash, we have one more question left. So do you want to just go with yours?
Sure. So my question is more, not more related to the customer base, but more related to, the whole talent pool and bringing people back to India. So now like for years we've seen, people trying to leave India and go to the States or go to the UK and decide, after 4 or 5 years of being there, that's the life they want to lead, and that's where they want to be. So any thoughts on how we could encourage these young people who are now graduating their respective fields to come back to India? How do we go about that encouragement, and what do you think would be like the greatest factors that play a role there? So either of you guys, if you have, it's not an easy question.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
like a curveball.
All right, so maybe I'll take a crack at it first, and then Neeru, you're going to add on to this. I mean, very honestly speaking, I think you don't have to do much, in my opinion, to be honest, right? Because I mean, India's truly, in my opinion, right? I mean, 10 years back, this would have been a proper relevant question, right? Like I remember when I came back, like, there was like very little concept of these startups, right? Like tech startups was not like a very strong thing, right? It was, yeah, I mean, this was when, like, I remember, back then, like, my wife and my co-founder right now, she was just graduating actually from MBA. And I remember, she was telling me the story that, during her graduation, and, companies like Flipkart, Snapdeal, all of these guys used to come to their campus, for recruitment. And all of these guys used to discuss that, this company's name sounds so funny, like we're going to join Snapdeal. And, now look at it, right? Like now, where are we, right? Like, I mean, now these are like the dream companies of every guy who wants to join and be there, right? So the reality is now India's a very, very different kind of ball game altogether, where, it's all about digital India, right? Right now, I mean, right from your government to the kind of companies we're creating, stalwarts in many ways, right? I mean, now we're truly in a space where we're creating second generation entrepreneurs. I mean, probably in the next decade, there'll be third generation entrepreneurs, and the talent pool and the entire industry is becoming much, much deeper, right? And in many ways, to me, I feel like the opportunity is now, right? In many ways, like what's happening is, when you think about Silicon Valley and actually doing a startup there, it's much, much more challenging, because, a lot of the common things that you think about as problem statements, they already have technology solutions out there for those problems and being solved. In India, yet today, right, technology solutions are actually, in my opinion, extremely shallow, right? We are yet at a point where a lot of the internet, a lot of the users in India are actually just coming online. So in my opinion, it's a fantastic time, right? If you ever want to be an entrepreneur, to come to India, right? And if you're a young entrepreneur, or if you're a person who's very young in their career, join a early stage company which excites you, work with a founder which, you can learn so much from, right? And take all of those learnings in. I would say that realistically, like, there it's, somebody else's risk in many ways, right? And that's how I, by the way, learned at Coupon Dunia, right? It was somebody else's risk. And I was just being like this, cowboy who's, in the wild, wild west doing whatever the hell I wanted, because I knew there's adult supervision in many ways, right? But I learned so much, right? And now I can take all of those learnings and, build, companies where, of course, the risk is so much more, and I miss that kind of, carefree kind of, environment that you have back then at that point in time, right? So I think, for people who are interested and, are ever thinking that, at one point in time I'll come back, really come back now, right? I mean, there are so many problems in India where, you need innovative solutions. You can come out with like, problem statements for like niche problems, and, there's such a massive audience base, right? So yeah, like, I mean, no need to wait anymore.
Yeah, great advice. Neeru, if you would like to add on.
I got some time to think. so I think to add on, I won't repeat what Mikhil said. So to add on to those, I think there's a lot of focus that the government is putting on made in India products, made in India services. So government is trying to encourage people to create. So startup wasn't even a buzzword when I moved back. I mean, nobody called anything a startup. And for us, it was like we grew up with the word startup. So it's become very easy to us. Now, even today, if somebody asks me, what do you do? I work for a startup, right? And then you're working for a publicly listed company. But you know what? That's the pehchan I have. Like, that's my identity. That's what I grew up at Infibeam with. But I think the market is here and opportunities are here. There's a lot of promotion which is happening both from private and public spaces for Indian made products, Indian made services. The world is becoming smaller. So in India, now you can create for the globe and not just for India. And these technology solutions, whatever we are adopting today, probably a lot of these are very tailored to the Indian markets. So only when you know the pain points and you are here and you talk to these people, only then you can create solutions. Because it's not just ideology. It's not another Facebook getting created. It's actually a very small time. And I'll give you an example. I mean, at GEM, what we do, see, imagine at government e-marketplace, you are connecting a weaver, a small time weaver, you are enabling him to sell to the government buyer. Now, what do? How do you enable this small time weaver to actually, one, yeah, he needs finance as well. He needs the trust that his money is going to come back. He needs some form of AI to show his product. He needs all this augmented reality tools. So all of this, these are enables only meant for India, because these problems only don't exist in a lot of other countries, the developed countries. So we have the right problems, we have the right market, we have the right audience, and we have the right government. So why not?
Absolutely. No, absolutely superb advice. Great addition. I think both of you have done a good job of adding in such great thoughts about how India has grown, how India is going to grow, and what you think is going to happen here. And I think just me personally, I feel very motivated and excited to be part of this ecosystem and come back. Moving back here was a great decision, and I'm looking forward to what you guys achieve in the future. And I'll just leave the last moment comments for Rekha to join in.
Thank you, Yash. And thank you, Mikhil and Neeru. It's been a very insightful session, not just about digital platforms, fintech and e-commerce, but I think just also about the whole journey of entrepreneurship. I think there is a lot of insights that you've given, in terms of entrepreneurship, and hopefully you have inspired a lot of the participants who are kind of, contemplating this journey. So I think and Neeru, I really like what you said at the end. I think that whole, I myself am a big believer that this is the right time to especially, utilize technology to solve problems, in India. And I think only Indians can do that. So I think it's a great time for all the, youngsters out there who want to start doing something. So with that, I'd like to thank both of you once again. And of course, we cannot complete the session without me thanking my wonderful team of volunteers. I think our Mumbai network has become active only because of the presence of a lot of great volunteers. Of course, we have Neeru, who is our stalwart, has been there for many years, but also some of the youngsters, as I like to call them. So thank you very much, Yash, Anshul, and Neeru, for really curating this entire event, putting it together. And of course, to Ashay, who's been kind of the pillar behind a lot of the webinars. And all of you are, I think he's a familiar face now to everyone. So thank you so much, all of you. And we look forward to more events in future and to connecting with all of you, keeping in touch. And we'll soon be sending out a mail with some of the capturing some of the key learnings from this session, as well as a recording of the session for those of you who would like to kind of relook or pass it on to those who may have missed joining us in the live session. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Neeru. Thank you, Mikhil, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you for
guys.
having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.